Hello, welcome back to Dimension Quest. This week I'm providing a look at the Ubuntu Linux desktop that I provide for attendees to use in the modern applications and multi-cloud Livefire enablement offered by VMware to partners and employees. During those deliveries, the desktop is provided via VMware Horizon, but in this video, the focus is on the base desktop experience. Right now, I do have the actual Livefire attendee desktop up in front of me via Horizon, but I will be disconnecting from that and connecting via RDP to a locally built version of the same desktop. Now, just for quick reference, I have never really mentioned Livefire before on any of my previous videos, but Livefire is the team that I'm in within VMware. Okay, so let's go ahead and switch over to the Livefire desktop. I have this Livefire desktop video RDP link here set up in my Remina. So I'll just go ahead and right click and connect on that. Let's get that into the recording window here. That'll take just a moment to get connected up. Okay, we can see the desktop status is showing as initializing. And we're checking for the Microsoft Edge updates. It'll also check for Chrome updates as well as Brave. It'll keep all three of those browsers up to date. The reason I did that as part of the initial login is because if you don't keep the desktop browsers up to date, then you get a warning in the browser once you're actually trying to use it. And for our attendees, we don't want them to have to worry about having the latest browser, so we just take care of it for them upon login. It's a pretty minimal workload and it happens pretty quickly. So we can see there that that's already completed. Now I do have Nextcloud Client as part of my overall desktop build, but I'm just going to go ahead and close that. We don't actually use that within Livefire, but I do use it here at home and for other personal uses. Now we'll notice right away that the Livefire desktop that I started off the video with had just a solid blue background because we want to keep things clean and allow the attendees to focus on whatever labs they're working on. But here in this build that I have for my GitHub repo, I have a wallpaper changer called Variety pre-installed and ready to go. So we can just click down here in the Variety link here. And if we didn't like this picture, we can click on Next or Previous. We can also copy it down to Favorites. If we don't like it, we can move it to Trash so it doesn't show up again. You can go into Settings and make changes as desired. Right now, I have this particular desktop set up to change the wallpaper every 5 minutes. That could be distracting. I did that specifically for doing the video recordings. Now we do see here that I have the Conky widget showing up a variety of information here. Now in the actual VMware Livefire desktop, I do have the Livefire logo showing here. But for the GitHub repo and the code that I have available for this, I default to showing the Conky logo here. Now, of course, I do allow you to override that in your own desktops if you like by simply placing a logo.png file in the pictures folder of the file structure before running your build scripts. Above the logo, I do have 3 different time zones being shown here: London, US Central, and Singapore. These are the 3 time zones that Livefires are delivered in. And for personal use or desktop, these could easily be changed by going into the .conkyrc file found in the home directory and just making adjustments at the bottom of the configuration file. Desktop status, this is automatically set during the initial login. It will not be green until the desktop status shows ready in there. Until then, it will be red text showing whatever's taking place. And of course, I've got the simple storage and memory, the general uptime, the internal IP address, host name, the username that's logged in, and the title of the desktop. So for this, I've just defaulted to Ubuntu Modern Apps with the minus equals and then equals minus before and after, just to keep things nice, light, and clean. Okay, so moving on, we do have a lot of international attendees to the Livefires, so I do like to provide the OnBoard on-screen keyboard here so that they can have a US keyboard readily available if they need to type any characters that may be harder to find on their native keyboards. So we can just go ahead and hide that for now. We're not going to be using that. Let's move on to the terminal options. So within Livefire, we do a lot of like modern application stuff around the Tanzu suite. So I have quite a few tools built into the desktop. And of course, many people might be comfortable using just the plain old terminal that is built into Ubuntu. You can add a tab to it if you like, so that you can switch between tabs if you want to get like really clean screenshots like I know one of my colleagues does. But personally, I prefer being able to split the window with a simple right click or maximize different panes of the window. I like to have just a multi-pane view in front of me, and I and some others have found it to be a little more useful than just a tabbed view. So that's where this next icon comes in. That's Terminator. So I've pre-configured Terminator to have a 3-pane layout. Oh, as you can see, the wallpaper just changed in the background there. Now in the 3-pane layout that I have set up, the larger pane up top, it takes up a majority of the space. It doesn't have any scripts that run as part of the initial bring up. So it's just a nice big open space. The bottom right side provides a little bit of some banner information. It just reads a .banner or .rc file out of the home directory. So it lets us know that we are running oh-my-zsh with the power level 10K prompt. We can see that here. Environment is Ubuntu. Kernel version, the Linux version that we're running, the internal IP address. This normally shows the external IP address, but I've X'd it out just for this video. And finally, we have the full host name here. So this is the host name as built by my Packer scripts and the build stuff that I have in my repo. In the bottom left, I have a similar banner file, but this one is specifically for displaying various tool versions. If I had the Tanzu CLI installed like it is on the Livefire desktop, then that would be showing as the first item here, but I don't have that installed here on this local build. But I do have Docker, kubecontrol, PowerCLI, and PowerShell, so I'm showing the versions of each of those. So in the top pane, if I wanted to split this into 2 panes, I can easily just right-click, split vertically, right-click again, split horizontally. Then I could run, say, htop up here, and I could do other commands here. Let's say I wanted to bring up a kind cluster. I have kind already installed here. For those that aren't aware, kind stands for Kubernetes in Docker. So we could just say kind create cluster. We hit enter, and that'll go ahead and start bringing things up. Let's go ahead and resize this window a bit since I'll spend a few minutes here. Now, I don't spend an extensive amount of time anymore working in the terminal and doing Kubernetes stuff, but I do want to ensure that the Livefire attendees and anybody that uses this desktop build has a lot of the tools at their disposal just right off the bat. So I do have things in here like K9s. Right, so K9s is a terminal-based utility for working with Kubernetes clusters. It's trying to read my .config file from the kube folder, but there's nothing there yet because this Kubernetes cluster is not currently available. And we can see that dropped out because there is no Kubernetes cluster available. So we'll give this a moment to finish bringing up that control plane and getting the kind cluster running. And then we'll try running K9s again. Okay, let's go ahead and bring K9s back up. There we go. And we can see that things are all set and ready there. And we've got the additional pods that are coming online. This gives us a live refresh view of what's happening within the cluster. There we go. Status is running. Everything is ready. And we are able to start doing stuff in Kubernetes. So I'm not going to spend much time in K9s other than to show that, hey, it's here, it's part of the script. Oh, let's close this little window here. It gets messy when it gets resized. Okay, so we will quit from K9s. We'll clear that screen, and we will just type K. So when we have K, that is alias to kubecontrol, and we can see over on the right-hand side, the power level 10K prompt is showing us which cluster we're in. We're in the kind cluster. And if we are working within a certain namespace, it might provide additional information there as well. Let's see here. What do we want to do? K get pods -A, show all of our pods. Now, not only is K an alias, and I misstated before, we used to have K alias to kubecontrol, but one of our attendees brought to our attention this handy little utility called kubecolor. So I've aliased K to kubecolor instead of kubecontrol. Now, to see the difference between doing kubecolor and the standard kubecontrol command, we'll show that here. Kubecontrol, get odds-a. So it's all exactly the same syntax. It's just a matter of how it gets processed. So we can see here that kubecontrol, it's kind of bland, just white text, not super exciting. This is far more pleasing to look at if you're spending a lot of time in the terminal. All right, so let's go ahead and clear that, and let's take a look at what else we have available. Now, during a Livefire delivery, we typically have our attendees working with, they might have a kind cluster to do their own little testing. They might be running a Tanzu Kubernetes Grid multi-cloud. They could be running a vSphere with Tanzu, so like a Tanzu Kubernetes Grid service cluster. So they've got multiple clusters to work with. They might connect over to a TAP cluster of the Tanzu application platform. So if they need to add a different config file to their Kubernetes environment here, I have a little tool called mergekube. And if I just hit enter, it'll let us know how we need to do this. So I need to type mergekube and then the path to the additional file. So if you were to download a config file for a new Kubernetes cluster that you created or someone else created and is giving you access to, you could simply use this mergekube to merge that config file into your current configuration. And then you can use something like kubectx, which I also have installed here, to choose which cluster you want to connect to. So right now we can see that I only have one cluster. Otherwise, doing the up and down arrow here would select through the different clusters that I'm connected to. And if we wanted to change namespaces within a cluster, we could do kubens. And then we could see which namespaces are available. So let's switch over to kubesystem. And now if I type K, my kubecolor, we can see that I'm in the kind cluster and the namespace that I'm in is in kubesystem. All right, so along the lines of the mergekube for merging two config files together, I also have remkube, like that, which basically will tell you which cluster you want to remove from your config. And in this case, we only have one config running, so I'm not going to bother removing that, but I do show an example there, remkube tmc-lab-02. That's an old lab that we used to do, and we would go ahead and clean up after ourselves by removing the config file so that we don't have invalid configurations within our Kubernetes config file. Okay, let's see, do we have anything else to show within the terminal? I think these are some of the major things there. So let's go ahead and quit htop. We can exit out of that. And oh yeah, so I already showed splitting vertically, splitting horizontally. Now let's say I don't really care for the black and white text and I really prefer this green down here, or maybe I prefer this bottom left one. Well, let's go with the bottom right. I prefer this color, or maybe I have some big file here. You know what, let's run htop. Right? All right, so I've got htop running down here. It's a little too small. I want to just focus on what all is running here. So I want to make this bigger, but not necessarily resize things. Oh, bad example. Unfortunately, when you're running htop, the right click doesn't quite work there. So let's just do this. We'll right click and we'll say maximize terminal. So what that'll do is it'll keep those other two panes still running in the background, but just bring this one into focus so that you can be focused on just whatever task you're working on. So I have a lot more space to look at everything here. We can see all the different pods that are running as part of the Kubernetes cluster that's running in kind right now. All right, so once you're done with that, you just right click and you can restore the terminal back down to its original position. All right, so we can exit out of that, exit, and we'll just go ahead and close out of the Terminator altogether. All right, moving on, we have Visual Studio Code. So with VS Code, when I initially set up this desktop and I had that power level 10K and the oh-my-zsh terminal set up, I went in here and went to do a terminal, and it was not showing the right icons. It was just a bit messy. So as part of the automated build here, I do also have the prompt configuration set up properly, and I have the fonts defined within the VS Code settings so that this will display properly. So we've got that running in there. And I do pre-install a whole bunch of different extensions that are used as part of our Livefire deliveries, or just making things easier for our attendees or for myself or some of the Livefire architects that do the delivery content and the lab development. So we've got quite a few things that are built in here ready to go. Most of my lab diagrams, I like to use draw.io, so I keep that installed here. Every now and then I still do a little bit of API work, so I do have Postman installed. That's available to, make your API calls, get things drafted out, figure out how you're going to do different connections. Of course, I've got Chrome, I've got Microsoft Edge. We saw that Brave is one of the things that gets updated as well. All three of those are Chromium-based browsers, and Firefox is part of the build as well. It just comes default as part of GNOME, but I have removed the bookmark. I have Shutter installed for a little more control and power over doing screenshot captures. Now, whichever logo gets set up and included as part of the initial build will show up here for the Conky widget, but I've also had it set as the little show applications button instead of the little gnome foot or the little 9 dots that normally would appear here. So if we click on here, it's the same thing as clicking on your super key, or if you're a Windows user, it would be your Windows key here in Linux. So that'll bring up the different applications that are available here. I do have GIMP in here, GNU Paint, ImageMagick tools. I've got Krita. What else do we have in here that's not bookmarked already? Oh, Slack, Skype, VLC Media Player, Zoom. We've got OpenLens if you want to have a GUI interface to browse around in your Kubernetes cluster. I do have OBS Studio and, of course, the Nextcloud desktop. So there's quite a few things here that may not be everything for everybody, but this is a really good start for a modern apps desktop if you're doing stuff with Kubernetes, with Docker, doing any of that kind of stuff there. So this has gotten a lot of really great feedback. I'm doing this video after releasing my GitHub repo. I've already announced that to some of our Livefire attendees so that they can download the repo and run the build scripts and build this desktop that we're looking at right now for their own use. If you want to do customizations or you want to learn more about how things are done, it's all in that repo. My next video, I will be walking through the build process of the desktop that I'm using right here. So that'll include everything from cloning the GitHub repo to adjusting the config files, running the script, letting Packer do the initial build of the script, the reboot, run through all of the initial build scripts, and then the manual login where some additional scripts run that require GNOME to already be up and running. I just want to point out just a couple more things here that I don't include when I do the other build video here. So let's just run Visual Studio Code for the .scripts folder from the home directory. So .scripts is where all of the scripts that are part of my repo get deployed to or copied into as part of the Packer build process. In particular, I want to call your attention to a few different things here. First of all, yes, we trust the author because that is me. There we go. And I don't need to install Docker. Now, I don't have the Docker extension installed in VS Code because we don't do anything that is strictly Docker specific. Most of the lab work that gets done is with Tanzu, so Tanzu Kubernetes Grid. All right, so what do we want to look at here? Run once, this folder here. So if we look inside of the RAN folder, all of these files did run as part of the initial login that was after the Packer build stuff. So once Packer's all done with it, what it does, we have to log in so that GNOME is available and the UI is there so that all of these things can install and get configured properly. Now, I do see that for some reason, install MS Teams did not run for whatever reason. I don't know what the deal is there. So I'll have to take a look at that. But we can take a look at login updates. So each time we log in, we do have a desktop file that's part of the auto run. And that desktop file calls this script. The script is in, I think, user local bin. So if we scroll down through here, we can see that it processes a variety of scripts, including things that are in the home.scripts login updates folder. So let's take a look inside login updates. We can see here that we've got a log file there. We've got our install and update browsers script. We saw that running here. That's what was updating the status. There's also this install update VS Code extensions. So this has a variety of things in there that will help you manage your extensions. So here we go. And let's see, scripts build. Let's take a look inside scripts build. So all of these here, these get run as part of the Packer build process. It's after Packer has already run the cloud init and it does its reboot, the OS will come back up and it'll do the post-processing. I don't recall what the proper name is right now off the top of my head, but that's where you can specify a folder with a bunch of scripts in there and they will be run in order. So that's why I have all of these things prefixed with numbers so that I can control what order these various scripts get run in. For example, we want PowerShell installed before we attempt to install PowerCLI because PowerCLI has a prerequisite of PowerShell. So that's how all of this stuff gets built out here. Now, one of the other special things that I do as part of the Livefire build is I have a login script that gets run. And this is a simplified example that I actually use here in my home lab. So I have a share, a mount that's shared from another server that gets attached to the desktop. And when the desktop processes the login file, it will check the mount for a certs folder. If that certs folder exists, it will copy all of the .cer and .crt files into user local share CA certificates. And then it will run the update CA certificates command so that everything gets recognized by the operating system. Now, one thing to keep in mind, if you use this method here, make sure that the only type of certificates that you place in the certs folder on your network share are your CA certificates. All right, you just want to have your CA certificates get imported in here. You can run into some funky issues if you try importing things that aren't CA certificates. Right, so once the operating system is aware of the certificates, the next thing I do is I go down here and I make sure that I've got the necessary tooling installed. So we need certutil, and if we don't have that, we need to install the libnss3 tools. Then once that's done, I check to discover where Firefox is keeping its cert database. Once I've determined that, I store that in a variable and I will go through and I gather up all of the certificates and make sure that they're all imported into Firefox and Chrome. That pretty much covers everything. And it looks like we have another updated wallpaper there in the background. Let's minimize here and see what we've got. Oh, nice satellite shot there. Okay, well, I hope you find this desktop intriguing, interesting. Maybe it will suit your needs. Maybe it can be a starting point for you to have a decent, reproducible Linux, Kubernetes, Docker build and test environment or just development environment. If you're one of the Livefire attendees, then thanks for visiting the video. Make sure you hit that subscribe, like, and if you want to see when my next video is coming out, go ahead and hit that bell icon and we'll send you an alert.